Hello, and welcome to this episode of my fan specialization series. In this video, I'll be going over a light armor elite specialization I have made. The subjects I'll be covering include weapon type and skills, utility skills, profession mechanics or changes, and finally, traits. Be sure to check out my other elite specialization ideas in the playlist and be on the lookout for more of these videos. Today we're going to conclude the light armor category with the Necromancer. For the Necromancer, I have created the Lichlord. The Lichlord is a profession I've designed to be more bruisery, self-sustaining, and more of a tank, by not necessarily wholly relying on the Death Shroud, or which I have changed to Lich Shroud. More on that later, but let us first begin with the weapon. First and foremost, let's go over the weapon skills that I've made. So for the Lichlord, I've given them a hammer. Now, I've also made another elite specialization video where I made a minion master elite spec for the Necromancer, where it's main hand focus, some ranged capabilities, and I understand that the Reaper already has melee stuff, but regardless, I made a hammer. So for the hammer, the auto attack would be Shattering Cleave, swing your hammer striking foes and applying vulnerability. Pretty basic. Next in the chain is Weakening Blow, swing your hammer striking foes and applying weakness. And then for the final auto attack chain, it's Final Crush, bash your foes, dealing stronger damage and applying vulnerability and weakness. This is a pretty basic auto attack. You know, most auto attacks have one effect, a second effect, and then the final strike typically combines those. So I just wanted to stick with that idea. And also vulnerability and weakness might give you an idea of how this elite specialization is going to focus and play. For the hammer second skill, I've made Grave Crush. You shadow step to a location and descend onto the battlefield with a destructive blast. So you're not necessarily blinking directly on the ground, you're shadow stepping above a location and then dropping down. This deals more damage, more targets, and a larger radius. Somewhat of an engaged skill as well. No, not somewhat. It is an engaged skill. For the Hammer 3 ability, I wanted to have this be the defensive skill for the hammer. So it's Rib Cage Guard. Take a defensive position, summoning a large rib cage to shield you. You take reduced damage and gain a Defiance bar. Wink wink, Defiance bars. After a short delay, you can reactivate this skill to unleash Lich's Binding. So with the Hammer 3, it's an 80% damage reduction. You are stuck in place while channeling this skill, and then a second later, if you're still in this skill and you don't, cancel it, you can unleash Lich's Binding, which reads, break your guard and release your Lich presence. Foes receive damage and are taunted. For each foe you successfully hit, you heal. This is minor damage, but mostly a taunt, mostly a control effect. In PvP, this would focus enemies onto you. In PvE, I honestly would like to see taunt be reworked to be more of an aggro mechanic, like a classic taunt. However, that's for another video. So yes, taunt and heal per hit. For the Hammer 4th skill, I've made Unholy Ascent. Strike a foe, launching them skywards. As they descend back to the ground, they send a wave of unholy energy, dealing damage to all foes struck. This is similar to the Daredevil's Elite, where you are doing that chain and then your second attack in the Daredevil's Elite skill will launch them up. It's a launch of 0, however, they do still gain height. I wanted to have some essence of verticality and some essence of devastating strikes and powerful, sending them skyward. And then finally, for the Hammer 5th skill, this is more damage. This is your stronger ability in my belief. It's called Possessed Entity. Slam your hammer into the ground, infusing death magic into your being, granting an area of damage around you. Additionally, for this spell's duration, claws will shoot out from under you, damaging nearby foes, and you receive a damage boost. So the functionality is you basically are a mobile damaging field with claws shooting out, but you also will gain a 15% damage increase for your other attacks. And those were the weapon skills. Moving on to the utility skills. Now for the utility skills of the Lichlord. I've decided to give them physical skills as it plays into the already pre-existing thing that I have going on with melee attacks and a bruisery gameplay. So for the heal, I've created Lich's Preparedness. Infuse magic to heal you and shield your body. You receive barrier for a percentage of damage dealt to you over this spell's duration. It's a minor heal, however, I wanted to be very careful with Necromancer because it already does have a lot of self-sustain, and I didn't want their heal skill to be just incredibly powerful. So the barrier is also another method of surviving. For the very first utility, proper utility, we have Soul Feast. It's a physical skill again. You rush towards your targets, stunning them and siphoning their soul. You deal damage and gain life force. This is a utility for a stun and also more life force generation. It's similar to kind of like a vampire, or like say in The Mummy when the mummy would grab them and then suck their soul out with their mouth and then just, you know, eat it. That's kind of what I envisioned. For a visual. And then next utility is Lich's Cleaver. It's pretty simple. You summon a Lich's Cleaver, slashing foes in front of you, and like a cone attack, damaging and taunting them. A little bit of a stronger damage with a 3-second taunt. The next utility is Fetid Retreat. You leap backwards, evading attacks. You leave a line of blinding and poisoning energy behind. You evade for 1¼ second. You retreat back 600 units, and then if enemies pass through or stand in the line, they'll be blinded and poisoned for a duration. Similar to Burning Retreat, but it's Fetid Retreat. Wink, wink. And the final utility is Bone Wall. You rip a bone wall from the ground, acting as a blockade. The bone wall will not allow enemies, allies, or projectiles to pass through, but can be destroyed. The bone wall would last for about like 6-8 seconds, but the wall health is dependent on your own health. So the more vitality you build, the stronger the bone wall will be, because the bone wall takes 50% of your own health as its own. This also acts as the stun break for the utility skills. I actually kind of really like this one because we know like Marjorie has the bone wall and stuff, but I digress. And then finally for the elite, we have Pestilence Bomb. You charge towards your target, striking them with a parasite, which will explode after a delay. If any other enemies are in the area during this detonation, the bomb will chain to them. So it's like the parasite will chain to them. So you basically rush forward, strike your enemy, and then after 2 seconds or so, the bomb will explode. The chaining area is 300. This is similar to, say, the Revenant auto attack with the poison bolt that chains to nearby enemies. However, this is just an elite version where it's in a larger radius and it affects 5 other targets. A little bit more AoE capability with this skill, but once again, it's a delay. So in PvP scenarios, if a player was to notice this, they would run away from their allies, and be struck by this. However, that puts them in a vulnerable state. So it's like, do you want to stay, damage your allies, or do you want to run away, but then put yourself in a vulnerable position, possibly? So those were my utility skills for the physicals. And yeah, I actually really liked these. I found them to be really fun to make. Moving on, we're going to be talking about the profession mechanic change. So for the Death Shroud, you might have been able to gain, it is the now Lich Shroud. In this version, I have gone away with Lich Form, the elite skill. I would replace that just with Grim Spectre. I think that is a very fitting spectral skill as an elite. The transformation is weird, and it's very, very powerful right now, I understand, but nonetheless, I've made Lich Form into Lich Shroud. So for the auto attack, it's Deathly Claws. slash your claws in front of you, striking foes in a cone. This is a melee attack. Yeah. Next skill, I mean, that one was pretty self-explanatory. The next skill is actually a summon. I wanted to incorporate a summon, at least one, onto this elite specialization. I, once again, have made another elite specialization for the Necromancer, where I've given them so many minions and so many interactions. Go check that out if you want, say, a minion master. So for the second skill, it is Summon Enslaved Siphoner. You summon a caged demon at a target location that tethers to a foe, dealing damage. The first pulse of this tether will cripple them. This is basically just a turret that will latch on to an enemy that you're fighting. It, in my mind, would attach to the first person that you hit and then kind of stay on there for a few seconds, and then maybe, you know, switch targets if you've moved targets after, you know, a solid duration. But it's just a constant ticking damage with the first strike dealing cripple. And you could have 2 charges of these, so you could place them on 2 enemies. Next up is Ripple of Horror. This is something we already have on the Lich form, but I wanted to bring it over to the Lich Shroud because, of course, we need a fear of some type. And of course, the teleport would carry over with it. The Lich Shroud 4th skill is Spine Flail. This is your channeled ability. You rip your spine apart from your body and you use it as a whip to lash foes around you. You deal damage and you apply vulnerability and bleeding. Once again, not super crippling or oppressive conditions. The vulnerability will enhance further strikes. The bleeding is just complementary. This isn't supposed to be a condition spec. I just wanted to have like another condition layered on. Honestly, you don't really need it, but hey, I made it. And then finally, for the Lich Shroud, your 5th skill is Blasphemous Ground. This is one of your only ranged, I would say, abilities, other than, say, the Summoned Siphoner. You engrave an area with tainted magic. You deal damage to foes and you steal boons. If you steal stability or resistance from an enemy, you will deal an additional spike of damage to them. So this spell really hates stability and resistance. I'm looking at you, Guardians, and I'm looking at you, Revenants. Malik's Revenants, I should say. This is a radius of 240. I kind of want it to be a radius of 180. Just because 240 I think is a very large radius in general. However, of course, cooldowns and numbers can be adjusted. The flavor of the skill is what I want. A ranged AoE where it'll deal more damage, and then additional packets of damage if the skill happens to steal stability or resistance. So that's Blasphemous Ground, and that is all of the skills I've made for the Lich Shroud. Moving on now to the traits. Keeping in line with my other videos, I'm going to be showcasing a sampling of the minor traits and the Adept, Master, and Grandmaster. For this specialization, I've actually fully fleshed out both of the minor traits, so let's jump in. The very first minor trait is Eager Brawler. You receive less damage from taunted foes and foes with weakness. This is 5% less for each condition. So if you have an enemy with taunt and weakness, you're going to be getting a net gain of 10% damage reduction. The next minor is a Lich's Sacrifice. This is targeting the theme of this specialization. Your healing skills, other than your physical skills, have reduced healing. However, when you use your healing skill while below half health, you gain resistance. I wanted to just cut all the healing that you gain yourself, just to be cautious of that bruisery playstyle, which focuses on healing yourself. I wanted this to be a spec where you can defend yourself, just not by chunking up heals. Because in a competitive situation, that sometimes feels really rough. Because you're like, I got them down all the way. And then, you know, Necromancers just heal all the way up. Even by going to Lich, or not Lich Shroud, but just Death Shroud, they heal a lot. So that's my reasoning. The resistance is just an added benefit, and honestly the majority of this minor is for the resistance, because it's taking away something, I'll give it something too. Now, for the major traits, let's talk about the major adept. I have latent shielding. You gain Aegis after leaving Lich Shroud, and then additionally, blocking attacks heals you. This is a 2-second Aegis, so nothing wild. Definitely something just to keep you up for a little bit, but of course 2 seconds is not very long. And the healing, I want it to be more minor, so 200 health. Of course this could be reduced maybe a little bit. For the major master trait, I have Spiked Shroud. While in Lich Shroud, you gain Pulsing Retaliation. Damage is increased while in Lich Shroud. The retaliation is additional defense, you know, making sure players don't necessarily attack you if they see that retaliation, or they become more wary of it. And the damage increase is 15%. However, it's only one retaliation every 3 seconds, so I didn't want this to be consistently on you when you are in Lich Shroud. And then for the Grandmaster, this is one of my more focused Grandmasters, which I really appreciate this type of reasoning and design. The Grandmaster trait is Phylactery Unleashed. When leaving Lich Shroud, you will taunt foes in a small area around you. Taunt you apply lasts longer. This is the tanking trait. This is what you want to go to if you want to maintain aggro in PvE or further control players in PvP. However, of course, in a PvP and competitive setting, the durations of taunt would need to be adjusted on the skills themselves, and of course, you know, have that dedicated skill split. This is with all of my elite specializations. They mostly come from a PvE focused mindset, and of course the themes of such elite specializations that I've thought of. So that is Phylactery Unleashed. Your taunt, if you want to, you know, tank, go for that one. And those are all of my traits. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed. Once again, I had a lot of fun doing all 3 of the light armors. Next, I will be focusing on the medium armors, and I have to actually finish them. I've actually done more of Engineer than I have Ranger or Thief, so that's quite surprising coming from someone who does not play a lot of Engineer. And then after, of course, the medium armor, we will tackle the heavy armors, which I pretty much have completed, other than the Warrior, which I need to just to you know, brush up and finish. Like the video, like to comment down below your thoughts on the Lichlord elite specialization, and maybe talk about what you want to see in a Necromancer elite spec. I want to see a Minion Master, but I already did a Minion Master spec, so I needed to think of something new. Thank you guys for watching, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day. Bye, everyone!